Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching how to make a crochet wrap top. For this wrap session, we went with a baby yarn, slips for a super clean look, and we brought ruffles for added feminine flair. Speaking of, if you're looking to add flair to your crochet makes, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of beautiful modern crochet patterns with new patterns weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 3 yarn will work, but I used a total of 275 grams of yarn, and that's 450 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 4.5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us your favorite jelly bean flavor. I am a Tutti Frutti girl all the way. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is for size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 3 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 4.5mm hook, and we're all going to start by working on one of our front panels, and it's going to be the same for every size, so let's all start with making a chain 1. Right after that chain 1, we're going to be doing an additional chain 2, so a total of 3 chains, but that chain 2, 1, 2, does not count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain. Now we're going to be inserting 4 half double crochets into that 3rd chain from our hook, or the first chain that we made. So let's all start with a yarn over. We're going to insert our hook into that 3rd chain from our hook, or the first chain that we made. Yarn over, pull through. Yarn over, pull through all 3. There's our first half double crochet, and we're going to be doing a total of 4 half double crochets. So to do the next one, we're all going to yarn over into that same chain, pull through all 4 for 2 half double crochets, into that same chain with a 3rd half double crochet, and then 1 more into that same first chain. So all together we should have 1, 2, 3, 4 half double crochets. And now from here we're all going to chain 1, flip our work, and we're all going to start with our back loop slip stitch row. So let's all start by finding that last stitch from our previous row, and we're going to insert our hook into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook. And we want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly after the stitch, otherwise the following row can be too tight to work into. And we're going to continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch until we have 1 left. So for all of us, we're going to have a total of 1, 2, 3 back loop slip stitches. So to do the second, find that next stitch, insert into that back loop, gently pull through everything, and then we have 1 more, so into that next back loop, yarn over, gently pull through everything. All together, we should have 1, 2, 3 back loop slip stitches, and into that last stitch into this row, we're going to be doing an increase of 2 back loop single crochets. Now, it sounds a little bit funny, but we are going to be doing back loop single crochets for the increase, just to make the edges a little bit cleaner. If we do back loop slip stitches, it could work as well, but it'll be a little bit difficult to see that last stitch because sometimes it can be tucked underneath. And the back loop single crochets look pretty much the same anyways. So, into this last stitch, we're going to insert our hook into that back loop, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. There's our first single crochet, and into that same stitch with a 2nd back loop, single crochet. So for all of us, we should have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches. Now at the end of every even number row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and this is our increase end, so we're going to start our odd number row with an increase as well. And the increase for this portion is always going to be an increase of 2 back loop single crochets. So into that first stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert into that back loop with one single crochet, and then one more into that same back loop with a second single crochet. And now that our increase is over, the rest of this row is going to be back loop slip stitches. So into that following stitch, insert into that back loop, yarn over, gently pull through everything. Into that next back loop, insert, yarn over, gently pull through everything, and continue this until we reach the end of the row. And I'm now at the end of my row. So at the end of our row 3, we should all have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches. And from here, it's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows. So let's do the following row. Now every even number row is going to start with a chain 1, flip our work, and then 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and an increase of 2 back loop single crochets into the last stitch. There's my 3rd, my 4th, and my 5th. And into that last back loop that we have, this is mine right here, an increase of 2 back loop single crochets. So we're going to insert with 1 back loop single, and into that same last stitch, a second back loop single. Now we should all have 1, 2, 3, 4 rows finished. Let's get started on a row 5, or any odd number row, so chain 1, and flip our work. Now our odd number rows is going to start with an increase of 2 back loop singles. So into that last stitch from our previous row, insert with 1 back loop single, and then into that same stitch, another back loop single. And from here, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And from here, it's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows. So as a refresher, every even number row is going to be 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, ending with an increase of 2 back loop single crochets. And then every odd number row is going to start with an increase of 2 back loop singles, and then 1 back loop slip stitch into the rest of the stitches. We're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until we have a portion that can reach from mid-underarm, working across our chest, making sure that we're passing mid-chest, over to mid-collarbone on the other side of our chest. And we also want to make sure that we are stretching it as if we're wearing it. And I'll meet you back along the top or right after we finish up an even number row so we can get started with our shoulders from there. So I am back with the increased portion of my front panel, and now we can get started on the shoulder. So just to let you guys know, I have a total of 40 rows and my width is roughly 5.5 inches unstretched. Now this may look a little scary, but this definitely has a decent amount of stretch to it. But once we're here, we should have all ended right after an even number row or along the top. So now we're going to make an even number chain that reaches all the way to the top of our shoulder. I need a total of 5 inches or 13 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 20. And now that we have our chain, we're now just going to do more back loop slip stitch rows, but without any increases or decreases. So right after our last chain, we're going to block off that last chain, do a chain 1, and flip our work. So just to get started on this first back loop slip stitch row, we're going to find that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, and insert with a slip stitch. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. And we're going to continue putting 1 slip stitch into every chain. I'll meet you back at the body. Now that we put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're now going to need to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch to continue on with our ribbing. So if you need to, flip your work over to find that last stitch from our previous row before we did the chain, insert into that back loop, pull through everything, and from here just continue putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now since this is the shoulder portion, we are not going to have any increases or decreases. So at the end of the row, all we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. And from here, we're just going to continue to repeat that row, so a back loop slip stitch with no increases and no decreases, until we get a shoulder portion that can stretch, because remember it does have a decent amount of stretch to it, over to the tip of our shoulder. And I will meet you back along the bottom or right after an odd number row so that we can finish up the panel with our underarm. So I am back with my shoulder. I now have a total of 47 rows, and my total width is now 6.5 inches or 17 centimeters, and that is still unstretched. Now from here, we're all going to get started with our underarm portion. So what we're going to want to do is insert our stitch marker into any even number stitch from the top right where the corner of our underarm is. Now I've inserted my stitch marker into the 26th stitch from the top, and that's just about 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters. And now from here, we're going to do our back loop slip stitch row all the way up until we are 2 stitches right before our stitch marker. So I'm nearly finished with my first underarm row. I put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch until we have 2 stitches left, right before our stitch marker, and now we're going to do a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. So all we're going to do is insert our hook into that second to last back loop, pull through for 2 loops, and then into that last back loop. When we have those 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, and automatically pull through all 3 of those loops. That is our decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. Now let's get started on the following row, which is also going to start with a decrease of 2 back loop slips. So chain 1 and flip your work. Now to do the decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches together again, find that last stitch from our previous row and insert into that back loop, pull through and also into that following stitch's back loop, yarn over and automatically pull through all 3 of those loops. And that's it. From here, we're going to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch till we reach the end of the row. At the end of the row, we're going to repeat our 2 previous rows. So 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last 2 when we reach the top right here. And we're going to close off the row with a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. And our following row is going to start with a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches and 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. All we're going to do is continue to repeat those 2 previous rows until we now have an underarm portion that can stretch, making sure that the point is underneath our underarm, all the way over to mid-underarm on the other side. And we want to make sure that we're ending right after an even number row or along the top, right after we finish up a decrease. And when we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut. So the entirety of one of my front panels is all finished. I have a total of 54 rows. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut right after my last row. And now my width is roughly 8 inches or 20 centimeters, still unstretched. For the front panel, we're actually going to make 2 of the same panels. So once we have one finished up, we're going to make another one that is exactly the same. And when we have both of our front panels finished, I will meet you back so we can get started on the back panel. So getting started on the back panel, we're all going to start by grabbing our same category 3 yarn, make a slip knot, grabbing our same 4.5 millimeter hook, and we're going to start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we have for our last row for our underarm. So for those of you that have my numbers, I had a total of 30 stitches. So right now, getting started on the back, I'm going to make a chain 30. And now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on our first row, which is going to be a slip stitch row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to do a slip stitch. So into that second chain from our hook, we're going to insert, yarn over, and gently pull through both loops on our hook. And from here, we're going to continue to put 1 slip stitch into every chain, leaving the last one, because we're going to need to do an increase into there. So now that we put 1 slip stitch into every chain, leaving the last one, into the last one, we're going to be doing an increase of 2 single crochets. So into that chain, we're going to insert with 1 single crochet, and then into that same last chain with a second single crochet. That is our increase, so the same increase that we did for the increase portion of our front panel. We're going to need to increase into the following row as well. So getting started on our row 2, chain 1, flip your work, and into the last stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert into that back loop with 1 single, and then into that same back loop with a second single. And from here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch until we have 1 left, just so we can increase together once more. We're now at the end of our row 3. We have left that last stitch, and now we're going to do another increase together. So into that last stitch's back loop, insert with 1 back loop single, and then into that same back loop with a second back loop single. Now from here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows. So a back loop slip stitch row that ends on an increase of 2 back loop single crochets, and then our following odd number row starts with an increase of 2 back loop single crochets and then 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. We're going to continue to repeat those 2 rows until we have the same amount of underarm rows as the front panel. So just to let you guys know, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 underarm rows for my back panel. So I'll meet you back when I have a total of 7, and we should all end along the top, and we can get started on the shoulder right after that. So I am back with the underarm portion for my back panel. I had the same amount of rows as the underarm portion for my front panel. We should have all ended along the top. And now we're going to make a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started on the underarm for the front panel. So for those of you that have my numbers, I have inserted my stitch marker into the 26th stitch from the top. So from where I'm at, I'm going to make a chain of 26. And now that we have our chain, we're going to do our slip stitch row. So just to do the first one, we're going to block out that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. And just like how we did for our shoulders, we're going to put 1 slip stitch into every chain. Once we reach the body, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. Now this is a solid back panel portion, so this isn't going to have any increases or decreases. All we're going to do is put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch until we have a back panel portion that reaches across our back. And I'll meet you back along the bottom so I can talk you through how to do the underarm portion for the other side as well. So I am back with the width of my back panel, and I did do just a little bit more. But right before we get started on the underarm portion, the total amount of rows from my first underarm row all the way to my last back row is a total of 52. And this width is just about 5.5 inches or 12 centimeters unstretched. And now we're going to get started on the underarm for our back panel, which is actually going to be done the same way as the front panel. So just to talk you guys through it, we're going to start by inserting our hook into the same amount of stitches that we insert our hook into for the front panel. When we have that, we're going to do our back loop slip stitch row until we have 2 stitches right before our stitch marker stitch. Then we're going to close off a row with a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. Since we're along the top, chain 1, flip our work, start the following row with a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches and then 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch all the way down. From there, we're just going to continue to repeat those 2 rows until we have the same amount of rows as all of our other front panels. When we have the same amount of rows, do a chain up of 1 and cut. But now that we have our back panel finished, we're now going to seam everything together. So let's all start by grabbing one of our front panels and then inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch. And now that our hook is in through the bottom corner stitch of both one of our front panels and our back panel, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. From here, we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam. So let's all start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert into that front loop. We're going to find that next stitch into the back panel and insert into that back loop. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. Let's do this again. Next stitch into the front panel, next stitch into the back panel, and pull through all 3. Continue on with our back loop slip stitch seam until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut and repeat on the other side. So now that our sides are seamed, the next thing we're going to seam is our shoulders. So now we're going to flip our work wrong side out, meaning all the seams that we just did for the sides are now going to be along the inside. We're next going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, and then we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook. And now we're going to do a single crochet seam. So pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side row within the front panel and also within the back panel, combining our 2 panels. So let's all start by finding our first side row, which this is mine right here. It is this divot. I'm going to insert my hook in through that top loop and then in through that back panel's first side row, which is this raised row. Insert your hook in through that top loop and also single crochet around everything. Let's do that again. Now this is my following side row. I'm going to insert in through that top loop. This is my following side row within the back panel. Insert in through that top loop and single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into within the front panel. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut and then repeat on the other side. So now that everything is all seamed together, let's get started on the bottom. So first things first, let's make sure that our work is flipped right side out now, and then we're going to be inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch that's nearest to our side seam, working our way towards the front. And then also insert your hook into the corner stitch of the bottom front panel's corner, just like this, to connect both of our front panels together. So now that our hook is within both of our front panels, here's my top front panel, here's my bottom front panel. We are going to insert our yarn onto our hook. Pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do a single crochet row across both of our front panels. So what we're going to do is just put 1 single crochet into every side row. So this is my following side slip stitch row within my top front panel. I'm going to insert my hook in through that top loop within the front panel. And then taking a look at our bottom front panel, we're going to insert our hook into our following side row. Now our first side row within the bottom front panel should be our side half double crochet, so go ahead and insert your hook. And if you're like me, you should have a few tail ends, so just place your tail ends over your hook to weave it in as you go. So just place, and now we're going to single crochet per usual. So we're going to yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. And now both of our front panels should be connected to each other. Let's do this again. Finding our next stitch within the front panel, this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop, insert, continuing to place my tail ends over my hook, and I'm going to find my following side row within the back panel, which should be our next side slip stitch row. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook into that top loop, and again, single crochet around everything. So yarn over, pull through 2, let's just do one more. This is my following side row within the front panel, insert in through that top loop, placing my tail ends over my hook, and then this is my following side row within the back panel, this one right here. I'm going to insert my hook in through that top loop and single crochet. And that's basically it. We're going to continue to put 1 single crochet into every side row, making sure that we're connecting both the top and bottom front panel. And then once we reach our side seam along the other side, and we're working across our back, just put 1 single crochet into every side row. When we make our way all the way around, we're going to slip stitch into that chain space. And just as a really quick tip, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this piece can stretch. So when the single crochet row is finished, try on your piece and make sure that it can fit nicely over you, making sure that everything is nice and comfortable. If it's a little too tight, redo some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, redo some stitches with a tighter grip. So now that my single crochet row is all finished up and everything fits really nicely, we're now going to get started on the length of the bottom portion of our top. So you can make this as long or as short as you'd like. I'd like for mine to be just about full length, so around where my hips are. So I'm going to start by making a chain that is 9 inches or 23 centimeters, and that is a chain of 50. Now that we have our chain, we're going to do a half double crochet row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 does not count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain, and we're going to yarn over and insert our hook into that third chain from our hook. So insert with 1 half double crochet. And from here, we're going to be putting 1 half double crochet into every chain. So now that we've put 1 half double crochet into every chain, we're going to need to connect it into the base. But we're going to want to make sure that we're working clockwise or to the left of our piece, because the ribbing that we have is not reversible. So just make sure that our work is flipped right side out, and that we're looking into the single crochet into the bottom of our piece. And what we're going to do is work to the left and find that second stitch into the base. So here's my first, here's my second. We're going to slip stitch into that second stitch to close off our first row. And now our row 1 is complete, and that slip stitch that we did into the base does not count as a stitch. Our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row, so we're going to need to work our way up to the following row and slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. So into that next available stitch, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull through everything. That slip stitch also does not count as a stitch, and we're going to flip our work. And now from here, we're going to be putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So start by finding the last half double crochet from our previous row, and we're going to insert into that back loop, pull through everything, into that next back loop, pull through everything. And continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the end of the row. So we've made our way all the way down with our second row for the bottom, which was our back loop slip stitch row. And from here, our row sequence is going to be a back loop half double and back loop slip stitch row. So getting started on our row 3, it's going to be a back loop half double crochet row, so chain 2 and flip our work. And now from here, we're going to be putting 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. So just to do one together, we're going to yarn over, find that next stitch and insert into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us with a half double crochet, and continue putting 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch until we reach the base. So I put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and we are nearly finished with our row 3. Let's just connect it into the base together. So connecting our half double crochet row, we're always going to skip that first stitch into the base and then slip stitch into the second. So here's 1, here's 2, slip stitch into that second stitch into the base to connect our row 3 or any odd number row. Now to work our way up to the following row, we are going to slip stitch into that next available stitch, flip our work, and repeat. So now one back loop, slip stitch into every stitch. And from here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows. So a back loop half double crochet row and a back loop slip stitch row until we don't have any more stitches into our base left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam everything together. So we are back and we have just finished up the entirety of our bottom. Now from here, we're going to seam it up. So this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, the same seam that we did for the sides. So let's all start by making sure that our work is flipped right side out. And to get the seam started, we're all going to find that first stitch into the front panel and insert in through that front loop. Next, we're going to find that next stitch into the back panel and insert in through that back loop. Then pull through all 3 of those loops. Let's do this again. Into the next stitch into the front panel, insert in through that front loop only. Next stitch into the back panel, into that back loop, and pull through all 3. And we're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain of 1 and cut. So now that our bottom is all seamed up, let's get started on our sleeve. So let's make sure that our work is flipped right side out and right side up, and we're going to insert our hook into the side row that we have that's nearest to our side seam. From here, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook and pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to put 1 single crochet into every side row, 1 single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way up and over, and then 1 single crochet into every side row to reach the end of the row. So just to find my first side row with you, this is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook in through that top loop. And if you're like me, you should have a few tail ends, so I'm just going to place that over my hook and single crochet around everything. There's my first single crochet. Let's do the next one. This is my following side row. So I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook with 1 single crochet. And I'm going to continue putting 1 single crochet into every side row, 1 single crochet into every stitch, making my way all the way up and around. Then we're going to slip stitch into that chain space, and then I will meet you back. So now that our single crochet row is finished, let's get started on our row 2, which is going to be our first Suzette stitch row. Right after we've slip stitched into that chain space, we're now going to chain 2 and flip our work. Now for this first row, we're going to start and end it with a decrease of 3 half double crochets. So let's all start with the yarn over and insert our hook into that first stitch, pull through into that following stitch, pull through, and then into the stitch right after that, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 loops on our hook. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through all 5. And now we're going to get started with our Suzette stitches. And our Suzette stitch is just going to be a single crochet and double crochet into the same stitch. So just into that following stitch that we have, insert with a single crochet, and then into that same stitch with a double crochet. Now let's do this again. Just as a quick tip for our Suzette stitches, we would typically be skipping a stitch right after, but for this pattern, for our row 2, we're just going to be putting 1 set into every stitch to get a little ruffle. So into that following stitch, insert with a single, and also with a double crochet. So let's yarn over, insert your hook into that same stitch the single crochet's in, pull through 2, pull through 2, let's just do 1 more set. Into that next stitch, a single crochet, and also a double crochet. And continue putting 1 Suzette stitch set into every stitch, leaving the last 3 so we can close off this row with a decrease of 3 half double crochets again. So I've made my way all the way up and over with my Suzette stitch rows, and we should have 1, 2, 3 stitches left. And now we're going to close off our row 2 with a decrease of 3 half double crochets. So let's all start with the yarn over and insert our hook into that third to last stitch, pull through into that second to last stitch, pull through and into that last, pull through for a total of 5 loops on our hook. And from here we're going to yarn over and pull through all 5 of those loops. Now right after that decrease of 3 half doubles, we're going to chain 1 and flip our work. Now the rest of our sleeve is going to be a repeat of our row 3, so the row that we're about to start working on, or until we get the sleeve length that we want. So let's get started. All of our rows is going to start out with 4 single crochets. Now those 4 single crochets don't technically count as this row, we just need our next Suzette stitch row to work in just a little bit. So just find that last stitch from our previous row with 1, into that following, with 2, into that following, with 3, and into the one right after that with 4. Right after those 4 single crochets, we're now going to chain 1 because we need the height because we're about to do another decrease of 3 half double crochets. So that chain also doesn't count as a stitch. And once we finish our decrease of 3 half doubles, that's going to be the first stitch for this row, and we're going to be inserting a stitch marker into there. So just to do this together, we're all going to yarn over. Into that next stitch, which should be a single crochet from our previous row, and we can tell because it's a little bit lower than the rest of our stitches. We're going to insert, pull through, into that following stitch, which should be a double crochet, and we can tell that because it's a little bit higher. Insert, pull through, and then into that following, pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook, and now we're going to yarn over, pull through all 5, and we want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of that stitch that we just made so we know where the first stitch is going to be. And right after that decrease of 3 half doubles, we're now going to be doing our Suzette stitch row. Now this Suzette stitch row is going to be done the normal way. So we're going to skip a stitch, do a Suzette stitch set, skip a stitch, and then repeat. So right after this decrease of 3 half doubles, we're going to skip the following stitch, which should be a double crochet from our previous row, and then into the stitch right after, which should be a single crochet. And as a really quick tip, each of our Suzette stitch set is going to be worked into our previous row's single crochet to get the texture that we want. We're going to insert with our first Suzette stitch set. So like I said, skip one, into the following, with one set, so a single and a double crochet per usual. And that is our first Suzette stitch set for this row. Let's do the next one. After every set, we're going to skip that following stitch because the double crochet that we just did technically counts as that stitch. If we work into there, then we'll be accidentally increasing. So we're going to skip that following stitch into the stitch right after, which should be a single crochet. We're going to insert with a single and a double. And just once more, skip the following stitch into the one right after, which should be a single crochet, a single, and a double. And we're going to continue to do this until we have a total of 9 stitches left. So we've made our way all the way around with our row 3, and we should all have a total of 9 stitches left. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And now right after that last Suzette stitch set, we're going to do a decrease of 3 half double crochets. So yarn over, we are going to skip that following stitch and into the stitch right after, insert pull through, into the stitch after that, insert pull through, and one more, insert pull through, for a total of 5 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through all 5, and we're now finished with this row. And now it's going to be a repeat of this row that we just finished up. So let's just get started on the following row together. Let's all chain 1 and flip our work. Now just like our previous row, we're all going to start with 4 single crochets. Right after our 4 single crochets, we are going to chain 1 because we need the height for the decrease of 3 half double crochets that we are about to do. So yarn over, into that following stitch, pull through, stitch right after, pull through, and after that, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 5, and don't forget to insert your stitch marker into the top of that decrease because this technically counts as our first stitch for the row. And now from here, we're going to do the same Suzette stitches. So skip the following stitch, which should be a double crochet from the previous row, and into the stitch right after that, a Suzette stitch set, so a single and a double. Once more, skip a stitch, into the stitch right after, a single and a double, and continue this until we have 9 stitches left. So our row 1, 2, 3, 4 is nearly finished. We should all have 9 stitches left. So let's count that out together. Here's my first, which is my stitch marker stitch. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And to close off every row, all we're going to do is yarn over, skip that following stitch, which should be a double crochet from our previous row, and starting with a stitch right after that, pull through, stitch right after that, pull through, and once more, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 5, chain 1, and flip. And from here, we're going to continue to repeat this row until we get a sleeve length that we want, or until we don't have any more room to do more sets. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat everything we just did here on the other side. I am back, and I have just finished up both of my sleeves. Now we are nearly finished. The last thing I'm going to do is just single crochet along the entirety of our neckline and our wrap, just to clean everything up. So let's all start by inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch that we have of the top front panel. So I'm just going to insert my hook into any of the stitches that I have that's nearest to this corner right here. And then I'm going to insert my yarn onto my hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And this is just going to be 1 single crochet into every side row, making my way all the way up, 1 single crochet into every stitch, and continue on with that, making our way all the way down. So just to do the first one, our first side row should be a side half double crochet row. So insert your hook in through that top loop with 1 single crochet, and if you're like me, place your tail in over your hook and single crochet so we don't need to weave in that tail in later. This is my following side row. I'm going to insert my hook in through that top loop with 1 single crochet as well, and continue this, making my way all the way up and over. Then when we don't have any more stitches left to work into, so into the last side row, into the bottom front panel, do a chain up of 1 and cut. And now that our single crochet row along our neckline is all finished up, we are all done. Last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, guys. Hope y'all enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Bye!